So first thing he did was try to find his wife and daughter, obviously, and first he found his wife, Holly. She was in such bad condition, he knew there was no chance for her and that she was gone. So he left her and moved on to try to find his daughter, Shelby. Shelby was currently on break from nursing school, so they were kind of catching up with her, hanging out, watching a movie, having a really nice family Saturday night together. At the same time, down the street, Kevin and Alicia McConnell were hosting a high school graduation party for their family friend, Evan Jennings. And meanwhile, there's Ethan Couch, who is 16 years old, a extremely wealthy child who was living alone at the time because his parents owned a steel company and they just made insane amounts of money. Just built a giant mansion. They decided to leave their 16-year-old home alone in that house to party and around with his friends, and that's exactly what he did. On that night, he was having a party of his own at his house with a bunch of other young teenagers, and that night they decided to steal from Walmart. They'd actually just finished their movie and they were hanging out in their living room, but then they noticed some commotion coming from outside their window and they went outside to see what it was. And the three walked out there was a wrecked Mercury Mountaineer and it had spun out and crashed into their neighbor's culvert. The driver was really upset. She was 24 years old. Her name was Brianna Mitchell and she was actually on her way home on a Saturday night from a catering job. So Shelby offered to let her use her cell phone to call her mother, and Brian Jennings is coming down the road at the same time. He pulls over to help and just make sure everyone's okay because this guy's like, you know, a pastor. He's this really nice guy, and he had two other kids in the back of his truck.
He tells us, he's like, no, y'all sit tight, I'll be back in just a minute.
He told them to just sit there for a minute and that he would be back. Meanwhile, Ethan Couch, he's partying at home, he's trashed. They were also using Xanax, Valium, a bunch of other things, and they were completely incoherent. His friend Star Teague asked to go to a convenience store, and Ethan decided to be a hotshot and drive her. And even after multiple people asked him not to, he insisted that he drive her there, completely wasted. Not only that, but he decided to show off. So they're in Texas, 2-lane road out in the country, and Ethan kept driving into the other lane and playing chicken with other cars and then driving back at the last minute. So at this moment, Eric Boyles decided to take a mailbox that had been knocked over by the car up to the front of his house. So he happened to not be standing with them at this moment, but everyone else was helping Brianna, standing in front of her car. And then here comes Ethan in his truck, a big truck, driving 70 miles an hour down a 2-lane road playing chicken. And he must not have seen them or something, because then he plowed into the back of Brianna's car, pushed that out of the way, hit all 4 people that were standing there at 70 miles an hour with zero evidence of any type of braking. Eric heard the sound of the crash from inside his house, and he said it was so loud that it sounded like an explosion had gone off and shook his house.
I felt, you know, we don't live in California, but you'd almost think you just had an earthquake. I mean, the house shook.
So he went running out there, obviously, and when he went out there, he saw a bunch of car parts, scattered debris, and people scattered around.
There were already people out there in front of the house. There was just debris everywhere, table and chairs and car parts and everything else. I walked in the road, and the first thing I did was I found there was a male laying in the road, wasn't moving at all.
So first thing he did was try to find his wife and daughter, obviously, and first he found his wife, Holly.
I'm calling out Holly and Shelby as I walk, and I kind of got halfway between the road and my fence, and that's when I found Holly. And when I found her, I mean, there was no doubt that she was gone.
She was in such bad condition, he knew there was no chance for her and that she was gone. So he left her and moved on to try to find his daughter, Shelby. And it's extremely sad, but he said Shelby didn't even look like herself. That's how she was from being hit by a truck at 70 miles an hour, and she was thrown up against a fence. So obviously news of this horrific accident spread all across social media and all the news networks very quickly. And where's Ethan Couch at this point? Ethan Couch left the scene, literally left. A woman named Shauna Clark and her teenage son Corbin were driving, and they saw a passed out teenager in a ditch. They pulled over, obviously, to help this person, thinking he was a drunk or hurt individual, and his mom went to go get help, and Corbin sat with him. And listen to what he told Corbin.
I kept saying, hey, what's your name? What's your name? He'd say, what's your name? And he said, hey man, I'm Ethan. I can get you out of all this. I was like, I guess he thought I was involved, but he was like, yeah, just remember my name. I'll get you out of all this. He kept saying that.
So clearly has no ounce of sympathy. Apparently when EMS workers came to help Ethan, he was extremely resistant to any medical attention and was just trying to get out of there. And at one point he started saying he couldn't afford an ambulance, which is completely. His parents are so loaded. 4 people died that night. Holly Boyles, Shelby Boyles, Brianna Mitchell, and Pastor Brian Jennings. Obviously, this small town was extremely upset, and officials decided to charge Ethan as an adult and try to go for as hard of a punishment as they could. They were seeking 20 years, which in my opinion isn't even enough. He was charged with 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter and 2 counts of intoxication assault. So Ethan Couch admitted guilt, but it wasn't until the sentence hearing that this case became really famous. Obviously, he was able to get a really great team of lawyers. His parents are wealthy. They obviously don't want their kid to go to jail, so they pulled out as much money as they could for this situation. At his hearing in December of 2013, his legal team called prominent psychologist Dr. G. Miller to the stand to testify on Couch's behalf. And the defense that they used was unheard of. Dr. Miller claimed that Ethan was suffering from a case of affluenza. Yes, people, that is affluenza, not influenza, which is the flu. Affluenza as in affluent, as in rich, as in too rich to take responsibility. They basically argued that Ethan's parents were horrible, rich parents that didn't pay enough attention to their kids and never taught him anything, so he didn't know the difference between right and wrong. Now, yes, I do think that Ethan's parents have a lot of blame to carry here, if not most of it, but Ethan showed his first of all, his lack of remorse. Never, ever has he apologized or acknowledged the amount of damage and suffering he has caused these families. So that me off. He didn't know better than to drive drunk, especially when he was playing chicken. That night, Ethan had a blood alcohol level that was 3 times higher than the legal limit. But the judge decided that Ethan was a little too white and a little too privileged and a little too rich for jail, and decided to sentence him to 10 years of probation and time in a extremely nice rehab facility that was paid for with taxpayer dollars because his parents claimed they couldn't afford it. Now, obviously, people were infuriated, especially the family members of people that died. A few others were injured, including Sergio Molina, who was a teen that was thrown out of the bed of Couch's truck, and he has a serious brain injury now and can no longer speak or move. These are Ethan's parents, Fred and Tanya Couch. They got married in 1996, but they actually divorced, likely over the stress from all of this, in 2015. Then, on December 2nd of 2015, a video surfaced of Ethan Couch at a party where there was alcohol.
Watch this guy clownishly leap onto the table. Right there, that's Couch, laughing hysterically without a care in the world.
Obviously, this is a huge violation of his probation. So the next day, his probation officer called him and ordered a mandatory test. Ethan, knowing that he would fail and go to jail, convinced his mother to help him in this situation, and Tanya decided to do so. She withdrew $30,000 from her bank account, and then some point between then and December 10th, they went to Mexico, he and his mother, to escape from police. On December 28th of 2015, Ethan and Tanya Couch were arrested in Mexico after Ethan, a few days earlier, placed a Domino's pizza delivery order from his cell phone, not realizing that they could track that type of thing, and that's how they found him. He'd also spent that entire week at strip clubs, drinking, was just completely intoxicated most of the time that he was in Mexico with his mother. On December 30th, Tanya was deported, but oddly enough, Ethan stayed in Mexico. So Tanya flew back with investigators to the US. Her bond was set for $1 million. It wasn't until January 28th, 2015 that they were finally able to deport Ethan back to the United States, and he was booked instantly in a juvenile detention facility. This is when he was sentenced to only 2 years in prison, and he has completed those 2 years, and that's why I decided to talk about this, as he was just recently let out of jail. His mother is still behind bars, but Ethan is out, and apparently he's changed in jail and has learned his lessons, become a whole new person, but I doubt it. During his current probation, he's required to wear an ankle monitor. He has to wear an alcohol detecting patch. He has to submit to testing and abide by a 9 p.m. curfew, which is all things that should have happened his first go around. But as of right now, Ethan Couch is free, and those people have to live with the fact that this kid only served 2 years for the lives of 4 people.